the best I can do.
It's just so like dramatic. Like I just like I'm so invested in the clap when we do the clap. It's just you go to clap and it's always just like, is it gonna be a good clap or is it gonna be a bad clap? Will we have to do it again? I don't know.
There's so much build-up and drama.
Yeah,
to it. So,
yeah. It makes me feel kind of like a little bit weird. I'm like, why do I feel so like invested in this clap? Why do I want it to succeed? And why am I worried about it not succeeding? It's just a clap. We can do it again. I don't know.
because it has to be epic the first time. That's the key.
Right.
All is lost if that's not the
If
case.
it's not just perfect the first time. Well, welcome back, friends.
To another riveting episode of Save the World.
Hooray! With your host, David.
And Aaron.
Yay!
All right, well, now that the formalities are out of the way,
Indeed.
should we explain to the listeners the momentousness
Oh
of
my
this
goodness. Yes,
episode?
Please do, David. Yes.
Can I have the honor?
Yes, please.
All right.
Please.
So, dear listeners, this is a momentous episode for us both because the start of Save the World began a couple months ago on a fateful day. It was a nice summer morning. Me and Aaron had played tennis for a bit, and then we went to go get some amazing sandwiches at Gandolfo's. And while we were at Gandolfo's eating food, we had a discussion about the topic we're going to discuss today. I won't give it away yet. But we probably talked about it for an hour and a half, maybe even.
It was at least an hour and a half, I think.
Yeah. So we were just at this fast food place. Fortunately, they didn't kick us out for just like sitting there over a very long time. But we discussed this idea, this topic, and it was what really made us say, wow, we could actually do a podcast.
Yeah. It was the first time that we'd both been joking about it, and then it felt like the first time when it was like, well, let's just do it. Let's do it. Let's do a podcast.
Like, this could work. Like,
yeah.
let's give it a shot. Yeah, like you said, like before I was like, yeah, like we'll do a podcast sometime.
Yeah.
And like in the back of my mind, I was like, nah, probably not. But after that day, I was like, no, like this might work.
Right.
So we will build up to this. Again, we're not going to give away what we're talking about yet.
Right.
And we'll start with something else that kind of leads into that topic. But
Yes.
yeah, it's going to be a fun episode.
It's a big deal, people. It's a big deal. So be excited. Don't build it up too much though in your mind, because if you do, you might be disappointed. But
That's true. that's just good practice in general, right? Don't overhype a movie or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Sometimes when I think back on that fateful day, I was like, man, we rambled for a long time.
That's true. It was really exciting for us. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe it's not as exciting as we're thinking.
Listeners will just fall asleep while they're listening. I don't care about this thing. Sorry, guys. You get to listen to us talk about. Or actually, you don't have to. But
We should have started with it's going to be the most boring topic ever.
yeah.
And then we could have built up. They would have been just, astonished because they had such low expectations coming into it. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, it gets them.
Blam! Most exciting thing ever. But as David said, we're not starting there, because why start with the best first? You always start with the less good first. Like when you get dinner, eat the vegetables off the plate first.
Yes, I agree. Specifically in that case.
Yeah, yes. Because it doesn't matter what the vegetables are. It doesn't matter like if they're mixed into other stuff. You eat the vegetables first, and then you can enjoy the rest of your meal to its fullest. At least that's been my theory for a while.
Well, and another rule is always start with Aaron when you start an episode of Save the World, because then you're going to be happy.
Is that a rule? Oh no. Okay.
No, I followed up once first, I believe.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I did make a point about it, if I recall correctly.
Well then, I will do my duty and begin this episode properly after we began it.
Please do.
Thank you. So, like I said, we're gonna start with vegetables, and these vegetables are video games. A question came to me the other day. I like to play video games. I don't have much time, and I don't have a lot of drive to play more often than not. But Steam is a wonderful. They always have games on sale, and I don't know anyone who has a Steam library that's smaller than the time that they have to play games. Like I think anyone who has a Steam library has more games than they can ever play in their life.
Yes, I can agree to this. Anyone that uses Steam is susceptible to the overbuying of Steam games.
Yes. They just $3. Of course, I want to pay $3 for this game. I want to play, and then you just never play. You never get around to it because you're busy. You got a life, which is a problem well solved. And Steam is a wonderful thing. I love Steam, but recently I bought Euro Truck Simulator. I think like Euro Truck Simulator 2 or whatever. I started playing it because in my childhood, I, amazingly enough, wanted to be a trucker. I just was excited about it, and I had a game where I drove semi-trucks in my game. You're driving, and it was just like, I was like so excited, like, I want to do this.
I feel like there's a deeper backstory here, but let's continue on with,
okay.
with your description.
So nostalgia purposes, I buy Euro Truck Simulator 2, and I started playing it. And during the course of playing this game, I began to think, because there's a lot of time to think, because guess what you're doing? You're driving a truck. There's not. You're just driving down the road. Like, there's nothing really to do. So I began to think about many of the video games I've enjoyed over the years and how many of them are work. And I began to think, why do people like to play games that are work?
First of all, I want to say I was hoping that this was all just a lead-in into some very deep philosophical question about the meaning of life. Like, this game I was playing while I was driving down the road, the simulator, I was pondering on the universe. And that's when I had the revelation that such and such.
No.
But this is a good question as well.
It just comes like some of the games I love, Roller Coaster Tycoon, Locomotion, Euro Truck Simulator. They're just work. They're just work games. Like, what is your job? You're just prison architect, manage a prison. I've seen my brother-in-law likes to play these games that are programming games. You program computers. That's like the whole game is programming. Yeah. Or there's games like Minecraft where the whole point is to grind through getting materials.
There's a game my older brother showed me along these lines called Factoria. And the idea is that you are trying to survive on this island type thing where I think it's an alien planet or something. Your spaceship has crashed.
Yeah.
And so like you slowly start from just like hitting things with a axe or a pick to get materials.
Yeah.
And as you get more materials, you can build like factories off of those materials and engines, and you just build this huge factory that can sustain itself and you have conditions. Anyways, but the exact same idea. It's just like building more and more stuff.
Right. It's just work. It's not anything.
And
special.
the one that always gets me that I still don't really understand is the ones where it's like the money ones where you're buying your whole job is to get more money in the game. It's often like a phone app.
Okay,
My younger brothers played one. I can't remember what it's called. But like you buy things that get you money faster, and then those things can buy more things.
Right.
And like the only goal is to get money, but like you're always buying things and there's no like end goal.
Right. It's just you just keep doing. It's kind of like it's just one of those click games where you just like a Universal Paperclips or like a Cookies Factory, whatever that one is, where you just click on stuff and then slowly like you just build up this empire of whatever you were doing.
Yeah, and I'm not as much into those types of games where you're just buying things for the sake of buying, but Yeah, I love Roller Coaster Tycoon, Zoo
Right.
Tycoon, a lot of those work-based games. Civilization
That's like,
is the most awesome game ever.
and that's like the pinnacle of work. Like, what's your job? To do work, to build a city, a civilization. Like, come on.
Yeah. And Civ 4 is the best, by the way. Just saying.
Sorry about it.
But leading to your question,
Mm-hmm.
why do we enjoy those games so much?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm a good person to ask this question to,
Really?
because I'm naturally a workaholic.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I naturally would like games that you get stuff done. You know,
Right.
you feel productive. You know, like you accomplish things as you went through the game.
Maybe that's just it. Maybe it's the feeling productive. Like you feel like you did something. Because that's a good feeling. That's a feeling I enjoy generally sometimes. Like I did a thing.
Well, and I think us talking about this is actually going to be quite almost silly,
Okay.
because there's entire organizations that are dedicated to designing games in a way that is addictive. You
That's
know?
true, yeah.
And so, I mean, we can speculate all we want, but there are studies and things that show like what makes a game addictive.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I can talk about a little bit about what I do know from some of those studies.
Okay, yeah.
And one of those things is, like you said, it is the desire to be productive and to accomplish things.
Feel
Right?
achievement, yeah.
But there's a very specific way of rewarding the player at certain times and certain increments
Okay.
that makes games very addictive.
Oh, okay.
And so, if you think about a lot of the popular games like Fortnite
Yeah.
and those types of ones, I haven't played that game, but I know that one of the reasons why the game is really popular is, well, first of all, it's free to
Yeah,
start.
That's a good start.
That's a good start. But the way it rewards players at certain times is really well timed
Okay.
in a lot of these RPGs and a
Yeah,
lot of these types
yeah.
of games, that your ability to do stuff improves incrementally at certain spacing.
Okay,
And
yeah.
a lot of those work games that we enjoy playing have a similar idea, where, like Roller Coaster Tycoon, for example.
Yeah.
You get a new ride
That's true.
every certain amount of time.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
You know, and
And then you get to it's like you're just doing your roller coaster park. You're like, man, I could use another roller coaster. And pop, bing, you got a new roller coaster.
Yeah.
Oh, heck yeah, let's build it.
and then like the timing of the problems is also designed in that similar fashion. Like,
Right.
you're not just sitting around waiting for money to come in on Roller Coaster Tycoon most of the time. Usually there's something to be fixed.
There's
or
something.
something to be dealt with, a new ride to be built, a new line to make, you know, that type of thing.
Someone threw up on the path, and you don't know where all the handymen are, and one roller coaster's broken down, and where are all your mechanics? Better hire 10 more because no one's getting it done.
Yeah, but I think that's exactly it. Like, we get to do a lot of things that we enjoy about work, but at a faster rate. And then oftentimes we get to make decisions that we don't get to make at work. You know, like think about a Roller Coaster Tycoon game or a Civilization game. You're making a lot of the managerial decisions, right?
Yeah,
A lot of the
yeah.
organizational decisions
Yeah.
and like the what I say goes decisions that you don't often get to make unless you're like a CEO of a company, you know?
Right. It's like, yeah.
And so we kind of enjoy that power of having that choice that we normally wouldn't have.
You kind of bask in the power and the glory of the power. You're just like, I can do whatever I want. I'm gonna make a coaster that crashes and wipes out all these people. And then you feel bad afterwards, but because you killed guests 400 through 425.
This suddenly turned very dark, but
They'll never get home because of you. Like, oh no. You gotta pull them out of. Oh, that was the worst when you accidentally drop a bunch in the water. You're like, oh, sorry, and you're like trying to get them out of the water before they drown because they
the
can't
little
swim.
pinchers that like grab them.
Yeah, yeah. Just, you gotta jumping, and then they're just like hanging by the pincer, and you drop them on the sidewalk, and then they start wandering around again, just like normal. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's why we enjoy the work games, is just all those factors of how quick it is, and
Okay.
we get the rewards faster and in a way we don't normally get them in a regular work scenario.
Okay. That makes sense.
So, listeners, we have a secret to tell you. The reason we bring this up is it's the perfect lead-in to our actual topic for today.
Which we found out last week when we tried to talk about this topic, and it went right into it was the end of the episode, and we tried to start talking about this, and then it led very quickly straight down into a deep hole. And it was we need a full 2 hours to talk about this. We can't just jump in.
It just got more and more complex and more and more branches that we were trying to cut off and save.
Yeah.
So we are ready to announce our topic, and we're talking about education.
Yay!
And so the reason that we've been wanting to talk about this for so long is, first of all, I'm a physics teacher, so obviously this is something I value a lot. But it's also going to be really interesting because me and Aaron have very different views on the academic system.
Indeed.
And how it should be laid out, I guess you could say.
Yes.
And so it's going to be a fun ride.
And I'd say not even just different views, but mostly just different perspectives. We come from different. I consider you an academic. You consider yourself an academic.
Yes.
You like to learn things at school and be in school and teach school, and you like these things, and I don't at all. I don't like school, man. I didn't do well in school. I'm not currently doing super well in university. It's just we'll talk about it, but we come from very different perspectives on this topic. And I think this is probably the first topic that we actually do have such differing perspectives. Most topics we're kind of on the same page about. This one we're just completely on different pages. So I'm interested.
The other thing I'll say up front is I'm probably going to offend a lot of people sometime during this discussion.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not afraid to say what's on my mind and say what needs to be done to fix things in education. And that means I'm going to rally against things that a lot of people hold dear in education that I don't think are necessarily extremely valuable. But we'll get to that point when we get to that point.
Right. Just a forewarning. It's just bear with us, please. We know, but please, this will be good. Maybe.
There's a qualifier there. Anyways, the reason we brought up the video game question about work is that, like we were saying, it led to last time this question that we realized was way too deep to end the podcast with in such a short amount of time. But the problem that comes from having these games that are like work scenarios and just games in general, because these reward systems are so fast-paced and so well-timed and so adjusted to match your brain's ability to want to receive those, video games are making it so much harder flow for students to succeed in the classroom, because the classroom scenario hasn't changed in any way, really, for many, 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 many years.
Right.
And our traditional structure we have right now does not have a nice flow of rewards like these games do.
Right.
And so the question is, almost everyone agrees that like education has problems. Like no one's like doubting that fact. But the question is, how do we solve it? It has very differing views.
Right. I agree fully, because that was one thing that throughout my, at least my K through 12 education, was I was way more interested in playing video games than doing schoolwork, because schoolwork was boring. And a lot of the same idea of like the video game was something that I wanted, something interesting, and it was I didn't have to work for it. I didn't have to work so hard for it. But it doesn't actually get you anywhere. It doesn't actually help you in a lot of ways. Like video games aren't that insightful. They're not really that skill building. Some people try to defend it, and it's like, yeah, they do good things, but they're not helpful things. They're not long-term helpful
You can't
things.
replace your education.
Right, exactly. You need education. You need to learn these things. But for a kid, for a student, it's way more fun to go play a video game than to do your homework, to do your math homework that you hate doing anyway because you're not that good at math.
Right.
Like, I don't want to do math. I don't want to do my English paper. And so you don't, because the reward isn't there for you. It doesn't give you any kind of reward.
And video games aren't going away.
No.
I don't think the solution is going to be abolish all video games. So
not if I have a say in it. Which I do, because we're talking about this problem here on the podcast. They're sticking around, people. I like them.
So assuming video games are sticking around, the question is, how do we change education? So I want to start with one common theory.
Okay.
So listeners, I sent Aaron a video that I wanted him to watch that kind of describes this idea, and we'll put it in the show notes, of course.
Of course.
But it's a video by Mark Rober, who I really love. He's a great YouTuber. I use a ton of his videos in my class. He's done a lot of just engineering feats that are fun to see, the applications in physics and things like that. But he presents a idea, which is a variation of a common idea that he calls the Super Mario effect. In general, in education, it's often called gamification. This idea that we should make education more like video games, where we have more of a positive outlook on the goals that students are trying to reach, and we reward them throughout in certain ways to give them points, almost like a video game would. And so I sent you that video.
Yeah.
And before I gave you any of my opinion on his different points, I'm curious what your thoughts were on the video.
So I know last time we did start dipping into gamification, and this video he made probably the strongest case for gamification I've ever heard. It was a TEDx video, and it was 15 minutes long, and he talks about how basically how when he did a study, and when people are given a task and not penalized for the task, this was the most interesting part for me. When they're not, they did penalized for the task, like trying to do the task and failing, they're willing to try more times to accomplish the task. And it's not as, according to the numbers, it's not as discouraging to have a loss of points. He sent out a little programming game, and each time you tried to do the game, you started off with a certain number of points, and they randomized this game and sent out 2 different games. One that would reset your points to the maximum 200 every time you tried again. You try to do it, and then you failed, and it just said, okay, you have 200 points, start again. And another version of the game where every time you failed, you lost 5 points, which isn't that many. Like, that's not that many points.
And they're completely arbitrary points.
Yeah,
in this online system. Meaningless points.
They don't count. There's not really any, like, they don't connect to the game at all. Like, there's no point in having the points there almost. But from what he showed, the people who had the non-penalizing game were willing to try more times, and more of them succeeded at finishing the game. More of them gave it more time and accomplished the task given them. Whereas the ones who were penalized tried fewer times, fewer of them accomplished the task, and in general it was just a smaller number of people who were willing to give it the time and the energy to try it. And that really struck home with me, because I could see the connection really quickly with education in how the rewards, like, there's not, I don't know, there's a lot of penalty but not a lot of reward. Like, I don't feel like I gain a lot from the school system, but gosh, by golly, if you don't turn in this paper, like, you fail the class. But, like, I turn in the paper, it's like, I turned in the paper, hooray!
Yeah.
Like, I did something. But the reward isn't. It's just like the game. It's not really there. Like there's not really any kind of meaningful reward for me. But the penalizing makes it so that I don't want to try. I'm like that other group of people who got the penalizing game. It's like I don't want to try. I don't want to give it my time and my energy.
And would you say that the reward is almost not real because you're just surviving school basically, but at the same time the penalty is very real,
right?
Because if you fail out of school, like that has traumatic effects on your life.
Yeah, exactly. Like I accomplished the goal, and it's like, oh, you passed school, hooray! Like you accomplished this thing that everyone does, and it's just kind of this abstract notion of like, oh, you had something to do, like you needed to learn a bunch of stuff, so we sent you through this system, and you learned some stuff, but really, like, I look at my diploma from high school, and it's like, I don't really feel amazing about that. Like, it's just a piece of paper now. I don't understand. Like, there isn't really a reward for me, and so that was the main point that I connected with the video. He did go right into. He did talk about like specific gamification that was like in kind of a way that I didn't agree with, like a way that didn't make sense, in that he showed like, oh, well, you have these tasks to do, and we're going to call this a test, and you have to accomplish the task. You have to do these things in this order perfectly. And you compare that to a video game. You know, you press these buttons in this order, and we're just going to visualize. We're just going to represent the instructions as a picture, as a moving picture, virtual seconds, and press these and call it a game. And by doing that, he was like, "Oh, see, that's gamification. Wouldn't you want to play that?" And I was like, "Yes, but what? Like, that's not the no. Never in my professional career have I been given a set of instructions that was press this button for 5 seconds and press this button for 3 seconds and press these 2 buttons for 1 second. Like, that doesn't. It's not how it works. It doesn't make sense to me." So those are some of my thoughts on the video. Those are the prominent thoughts.
So
I don't know, what were your thoughts on the video? What did you agree with? What did you not agree with?
So,
that's what I'm interested about.
I find your position interesting. I'm glad that you disagreed with his oversimplification of gamifying stuff.
It was way too simple. I was like, the heck? That's not how that works. That's not how that works.
I think, again, I really respect Mark Rober, and I love all his stuff.
Yeah.
But I think he falls into the same trap that a lot of people in education do, where they have an idea to fix the system, but they can't get past the abstraction of the theory. They have this, like, grand idea, like, oh, gamify everything, and I can turn simple tasks into games.
Yeah.
But people really struggle if you ask them to give me a concrete example.
Right.
They can't, because they don't really know how to work out the details of turning something from an English test or, a math homework assignment and turning it into a game.
Into a game, yeah.
They all say, oh, you can do this and it'd be great. But I think he falls into that same trap of keeping it too general, and you can't show the specifics of what's going on.
Right. It would have been a lot more valuable to have him show an example of an actual test, an actual thing that I would be given in school, not just this abstract nonsense of pressing buttons. I was like, wait, but not ever in school have I been asked to do this task. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
So I'm glad you agree with me on that.
Okay. So okay, you agree.
Otherwise, it would have been really hard to argue at this point.
Right.
But the more interesting thing is I find your perspective on that first study, the two programs, the one that penalized you and the one that didn't.
Yeah.
I find that I have the opposite view.
Oh, really?
When I am given an infinite number of chances to do something, I find myself less and less motivated to do it.
Okay.
Because I'm not given, maybe not chances, but specifically like a deadline.
Okay.
Right? I have to accomplish a task by a certain time. If I know that is the case, I'm much more motivated to do it.
Right. That makes sense, rather than just sit around and wait for when you want to do it.
Right. And so, I mean, he didn't talk specifically about timing, But I found that the having, as many chances as needed to accomplish the task, I would find myself less motivated to work in that type of environment and to study in that type of environment.
Okay.
If I could turn in my homework 10 times, let's say, for example,
Right.
I would be less motivated to do it right the first time, I feel like.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And I think this is perhaps why you and me differ so much in this academic perspective, because I found the penalties motivating. Because I don't, if I turn in the homework and I get 50%, then, that's causing me to get bad grades and that type of thing. So that my motivation came from wanting to make sure I did things correctly the first time so that I didn't lose points.
Okay.
And that type of thing.
Okay.
But you can't argue with the study, right? So
Right.
So it was interesting to see this idea that there is that penalization. But I think I agree with you that most students find this arbitrary penalty structure demotivating. But I don't agree necessarily with the solution that you should just allow infinite redos or chances to do it again. Because I've personally seen in my physics class that when I do allow for lots of makeup or retakes and that type of thing, the students just don't come in prepared. They're just like hoping for, hopefully I'll do it better this time. Like there's not really nothing changed on their end. Right. They're just hoping that they got a second chance and then something magical will happen in between.
Right. Well, and that makes sense. I almost now that you bring it up, I do agree as well, because I'm thinking back on like one of the tests that the test that I'm probably the most proud of in my high school career was my emergency medical responder test in my EMR class, and I studied like a madman for that test. But I don't really know what was driving the motivation at that point. Like I don't know why I was so motivated to try and to learn and to get ready for that test. But I wouldn't have tried so hard if I had multiple tries. I wouldn't have studied so hard if there wasn't one chance to get it right. The study was really nice. I actually really liked the study because it did fall under that category of you have infinite tries. It was like a pre-test where you could just do the pre-test over and over and over and over and over again, trying to get every question right, trying to understand every question, change up questions on you, and it would change things, and it was just like this quiz, this infinite quiz. And then when I did that just over and over and over and over again until I went and took the test and aced the test. Like I think I got like one question wrong or two questions wrong, which is better than anyone else in the class, and which I'm really proud of because I never try in school. I never tried really that hard to be the best in the class, but I was that one time I needed that. But that's beside the point. So I agree that deadline of you have one chance to get this right. That's what was motivating that time. So I agree that you can't just have infinite tries. That doesn't make any sense.
I think the reason why the study was the way it was, or the results were the way they were, was that the way he set up the problem for the study is he had volunteers come in and say, I think the setup was like, I want to show that anyone can program. He kind of had this facade on to try and get people to do the study, but it wasn't really the point of the task.
Right.
And so he put this thing on saying, I just want to see, like, I want to prove that anyone can program, so I want you to do this little game to show if you can program or not. And that's where they got randomized into the two groups.
Yeah.
And it was actually really funny because if you look at the YouTube comments for that video, he said in the video that the purpose of the study wasn't to show people they could program. It was to do this, penalty versus non-penalty study.
Yeah.
But one lady in the comments is like, actually, I did your little program game thing, and it motivated me to become a programmer. And she was like actually in college at that time,
really
like, getting her degree or her certificate in programming. And so she's like, maybe you should do those types of studies more often. So it kind of made me laugh. But I think there's something to be said about that, where it was people that wanted to see if they could do the programming.
They were volunteering their
They
time.
were volunteering their time into it, and they wanted to see if they could accomplish that task.
Right.
And in that case, I can see where the penalty is very demotivating, because you say, well, you're right, I'm just not smart enough to do this task.
I can't do it, right.
Whereas if you have more chances, you're more motivated to say, okay, I can figure this out. You
Okay.
know, I am smart enough to program, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that's the difference in the study versus what happens in the classroom. Because honestly, when I have students in my physics class, most of them do not want to learn physics. And I don't blame them. And I don't think the solution is we have to force kids to want to learn physics.
Right. Well, then that's almost nonsense. That doesn't make any sense at all anyway. Forcing people to want to do stuff, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't do that.
So I guess I'm curious if you would agree with this.
Okay.
But in my general experience with education, I mostly disagree with gamification.
Okay.
I feel like a lot of it is trying to get students to want to learn and to do something that they intrinsically don't want to do.
Right.
And we're trying to trick them into learning something.
Right. He used that a lot in the video, trick them.
Like, yeah, you're tricking them into learning physics, or you're tricking them into learning whatever.
Right.
And students are smart in that regard. They're not dumb. They're not going to fall for our gamification methods to try and trick them into playing this game, whatever it may be.
Right.
And then suddenly they learned physics and they didn't realize it.
Right, because they're still sitting in a classroom. It's a mandatory game. Like, that's no fun.
Right. And there's no amount of gamification you can do where the student is learning physics or math or English or whatever it may be, and them not realizing that they are learning it.
Right.
I can't really teach a student physics unless they can, manipulate an equation and plug in values for a known unit and solve certain types of problems. And they're always going to know that they're doing that, no matter what context or what setup I put it in.
Yeah,
you know?
It's really hard to disguise algebra as anything other than algebra.
I mean, and there are things you can do to make it more interesting, but you can't trick them. I always hate that idea and that mentality.
Yeah.
You can disguise their learning so they don't know they're doing something that they don't want to do.
Right, so they don't know that they're actually learning something useful instead of just wasting their time.
Would you agree, or do you?
I agree. I agree 100%. I think it's a step backwards. I think it's a step in the wrong direction. I see the way I'm thinking about it right at this moment. I see things in my head a lot. Okay. And what I'm seeing right now is there's like three blocks or three. It's like a Venn diagram with three circles.
Okay.
And each circle represents something different. One circle represents childhood, like being a kid and things that you do as a kid. And one circle represents school, and the middle circle represents school. The right side circle represents the thing that comes after school, which is work. It's career. It's life after school.
Right.
There's just kind of this Venn diagram. And what gamification does is it takes the being a kid circle and the school circle and tries to move the school circle further over the being a kid circle and moving it away from the after school circle, the career circle. It moves it the wrong direction. And when we take it that direction, it's like, oh, keep being a kid, keep playing games, keep indulging in childish endeavors. Which isn't hard for kids to do, because that's what I wanted to do all through school. I didn't want to do school. I wanted to play games. I wanted to physically force those circles back the way that this gamification idea is talking about. Where I think what I think is actually more useful is to push it closer to the middle and closer towards career work and towards actual work, actual life. Because like being a kid is only a couple of years, and then being at school is only a couple of years, and then like your career is like 40 years. Like it's like the rest of your life. It's like the majority of your life. Like you need to prepare for that. Not being a kid, not playing games, because there's plenty of time to play games, and people want to do that anyway. It's something that you choose to do for fun. And I don't think that's I don't think that's helpful long term. I think in some ways, if it could be done, I don't see how it could be done, but if you could do it, gamification in schools, I think it would be valuable to help learn material. Maybe I think it would be helpful to learn material, but I don't think it would be helpful in the long term when you actually get into a real job.
I like that visualization, because I haven't thought of it in that way in my head, but that's totally what I was thinking, that gamification is almost justifying, like you said, this idea that life should be like a video game.
Right.
If it's not fun, it's not worth doing. And that's a really bad way to try and get through life and a career.
Right.
You're not going to be able to hold a career if you're only doing fun things. You don't want to do something unless it's fun. There's not going to be a lot of people that want to hire you. I'm sorry.
Right. And there's not going to be much to do anyway, because every job has something that sucks. Sanding and woodworking, it's not fun, but I still have to do it.
So I agree that school should be more like work, more preparatory to work, and it should function in a way that is similar to work. I think one of the big problems is these three circles: being a kid, right, and just kind of life in general, going to school, and having a job. They're so disparate in the structure and the way things are expected to be, and how rewards are placed, and what the expectation. It's just, there's such a big divide between those.
Right.
And if we're going to try and get any two closer together, it should be school and work rather than school and being a kid.
Right.
And the fun things you like to do, well, they're fun things you like to do, and you still do those when you're an adult.
Right.
But it's not any type of preparation for how you're going to behave in a work scenario.
Right. Like we talked about those work video games. Like playing work games, like that doesn't prepare you for work. Not even kind of. That just, you just play games. You're playing a game. I'm not driving a truck for 6 hours and actually parking a truck and actually learning how to work on a diesel engine. Like there's nothing useful coming out of the game. You're just playing, and it's nothing like a real job. But you enjoy it, and it's good. It's good. We need that part of life. I think we need every circle in that equation.
Right.
And we need to pass through every circle. But the problem is that if you pass through the first one, everyone passes with flying colors. Not everyone. Like, it's really easy.
You could argue that I didn't get through the kids' circle with passing colors, flying colors.
Dude's like, I don't want to play. I don't want to have fun. I want to work. I want to get stuff done.
Really quickly, have you seen the new Christopher Robin movie?
Yeah, I did.
I love the scene where the little girl is like, if I'm going to go play, I'm going to go play harder and better than any kid has played. I was like, yes, that was me. That was totally me.
I can see it now. I can see you as that child. Just the attitude and the feeling. Like, play? Yeah, we're going to play. We're going to play hard. We're going to play better than everyone else. Heck yeah. Even though she's like by herself, like, I'm going to be the best. Like, just go have fun, kid.
Anyways, sorry.
So you need to pass through every circle. And it's really easy to go through like doing what you want to and being a kid and learning all this stuff. It's just life. You just live life. It's easy. It can be easy. It in the right, like, yeah, anyway.
Life is life.
That's a topic for another day. So you pass through that one, flying colors. You get A+ on the first circle. And then you get to the second circle, education. And if you fail this circle, the third circle is terrible. It turns into like this terrible place where you don't want to be. But like being a kid, you weren't being graded on that hard. And then like you get to, I don't know. Just babbling. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. And I would add that part of the problem too is, when you're a kid, things are so concrete because things that are fun naturally are enjoyable to you, and your body reacts to fun things. So you know what to do as a kid. You know what things you enjoy. In work, you have very specific deadlines and very concrete goals and things that your employer wants you to do by certain times or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And those are also concrete. But school has this very abstract sense of expectation.
Right.
You have to take these classes because we said so.
Right, you have to learn everything.
You have to learn everything because we said so. Right. You have to turn in by this day because we said so. And so you go from concrete to abstract to concrete. And so you could almost argue that like being a kid is almost closer to being in a work scenario than school is in a lot of ways, because everything's so well defined in life and work, but it's so abstract in school. And yet, if you don't get through this abstract barrier that we call education, then the other one is so much harder for you, just because simply you can't get the jobs that are more fulfilling because you don't have the education required for them. And
right. And you do, like, it's like you do need to pass through that cert. You do need education. Like, it's valuable to go to school. School is awesome. Like, we need this to have a standardized education system like that. I think that's good. I think it's good that everyone learns English and learns science and learns all these different things. But I couldn't agree more about the abstract because someone said so, because you're supposed to. Like, I couldn't agree with that abstract concept more, because that's one thing as I started going to university that really just like it totally broke school for me, because I was going to school and I was working. And at work, everything made sense. It's like, okay, I do cabinetry, and okay, so we have a job to make cabinets. We need to make these cabinets, and it's like, okay, well, what do we need to do to make the cabinets? So we get ready to make the cabinets. So, okay, what day do we need to deliver the cabinets? Like, when do we need to install the cabinets? Oh, well, there's a whole series. There's this whole tree of things that need to happen before you can install cabinets. The floor needs to go in, and the walls need to go in. You need sheetrock, and the tile guys need to come, and you need to make sure all the outlets are placed correctly. You make sure the cabinets are going to fit. You make sure the walls have the windows in them. Make sure everything's right. There's a long list of things that need to get done before you can do cabinets. But then as soon as your cabinets are in, we need countertops. And the whole goal of the project is to get this thing done as fast as possible and right at the same time.
Right.
Because somebody's paying money to get this thing done. So we need to get this done. And it's not arbitrary. There's no arbitrary deadlines. Like, you guys need to have your cabinets in by this day, because April 21st, because that would be a good day for cabinets. Or because that's when we decided that you should have cabinets in. It's like, what? No. You need to have your cabinets in April 21st, because April 23rd, the countertop guys are coming to do template. Like, you need to have this ready so that we can keep going with the project, so that the project doesn't stop, and so that all these people get paid on time. That's the whole. There's no, like you're saying, it's concrete. There's no arbitrariness with all these work settings. But then I go to school, I'd go from this good, solid structure to school, and I'd sit there in class, and they're like, "Okay," and I'd sit there. It's like, "Okay, this is what we're going to learn this semester," and I got to think, I was like, I can learn this faster,
right?
But you can only take it in a semester block or half a semester block. Like, which one do you want? It's like, why do I need a semester? Why is there this arbitrary semester of time that I need school? And then, like, they give me assignments. It's like, okay, we need to do this next time. It's like, okay, but like, yeah, so we can learn the next thing, but it's just all felt so abstract. Like, it's just arbitrary deadlines that don't mean anything. They don't actually mean anything at all. So I couldn't agree more with your observation.
It is interesting, because as I'm saying this, again, I'm coming from the academic perspective, and so it's taken me a while to see that this is a problem. So like our conversation again, that fateful day at Gandalf was kind of opened my eyes to that this is a problem for a lot of people, because their jobs don't match what their schoolwork was like. Whereas I went into academia, and I went into school with the idea that I was probably going to stay in academia and stay a teacher. And, so even though the deadlines were arbitrary and that type of thing, it was the structure that I knew my career was going to be in.
Oh, okay.
And so I naturally just work in this environment, and it's just something I am used to, because it's how I've always been in school. Deadlines have always been arbitrary and defined by some system.
Right.
And so I work well in this environment, and it's motivating to keep staying in this environment, because I know my job's going to be in this environment.
Yeah.
So it took me a while for me to see that when students don't have that connection of, I'm not staying in academia, I want to go in the real world, I guess you could say. That there is that disconnect of how school treats students versus how your work often will.
job would, yeah.
So what I want to do, because again,
Okay.
this is a big problem.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I'd like to break this up into 2 parts.
Okay.
First part being, well, I guess we could do this in either order.
Yeah.
But I want to do one part of what types of things can teachers do and the school systems do right now without radically changing the entire school system so that we can we call it careerification? Careerification? Do
I
some careerification
love
for their
that.
school?
We careerify
The classroom?
the classroom. That's so good. I can't believe how good that is.
So I want to talk about what types of things teachers can do right now and schools can do right now to make classrooms more like a work scenario in a positive way.
Okay.
And
yeah.
then I also want to talk about what radical things should happen if we really want to fix the education system.
Yeah.
That I don't have the resources or ability to change, but I want to see happen in the world.
Don't worry, David. Someday you will. Someday this podcast, like we talk about, will be a moving force in the world. just like our data center. We're gonna go back and say, okay, guys, episode 7. Episode 7, careerification. It needs to happen, and the whole world will shift for us. No. I like that though. I like having both of those.
So I guess the question is, which would you rather start with first? The
Definitely.
concrete ones we can do right now, or the abstract, or not abstract, but the revolutionary, change the entire school system and the world type?
I definitely think the little things right now would be more useful. I'm more interested to hear those because I think they're more directly applicable.
Okay.
And I'm incredibly interested to hear your thoughts because you actually teach. I've never like taught a class before. I've never been inside the education system on your end, and so it's like I don't know. That's a good idea. That's a good question. So what's some of your ideas? What's the prominent thought in your mind to help like ideas that things that teachers can do now to careerify?
To careerificate.
Yes.
That sounds bad.
Yes, no.
Careerification. That's the general
Yes.
general word. Well, I do have some thoughts, and
Okay.
I have thought about this quite a bit. I want to start with at the teacher level first.
Okay, yeah.
So, think from my perspective, for example.
Okay.
Right, I teach physics.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most hated classes
Yeah.
in the school system.
Oh yeah.
Up there with math and other things, right?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of students that don't want to learn this stuff. And my goal is not to force them to
Yeah.
want to learn, right? You can't do that. There's too many problems.
Yeah.
And it's just life doesn't work that way.
Right.
But I tell my students, and I often tell my students when they ask, like, when am I going to use this? That's a common teacher question. And when I was first teaching, I used to be like, oh, because physics is great, and physics teaches you about the world, and you'll be able to predict all these things about motion and all this like super nerdy stuff that I love.
Right.
But
the part that you actually enjoy about physics.
but does not really speak to my students, right?
Right.
It just doesn't grip them like it
Right,
does
right.
me. But now my response has been more that physics is a way for you to be able to look at problems differently, right?
Okay.
And so I don't need you to love physics like I love physics. You don't even have to like it, but it will. But the proper study of physics and just generally doing something that you don't want to do, but having to look at something in a different way, forces you to be better at solving any type of problem, having to look at it from a different system. And so I tell them, I want my classroom, again, like we were talking about, to be as much as it can be a preparation for a career. And not in the way that physics itself directly prepares them for their career. It might if they like physics and want to go into something in that field. But more that, hey, look, sometimes people want you to see something from a certain perspective, or you need to read some memo, or your CEO has some certain vision they want you to see something from, or whatever it may be. And you sometimes you just have to be willing to look at things in a different way and be able to deal with the problems in that setup, whatever it may be. So the setup that I used to have was the traditional setup.
Okay.
You have, homeworks every day. If you turn it in late, it's 70% of your original credit.
Yeah.
All the standard teacher system stuff,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But if I'm really wanting my students to be better prepared for a career or whatever it may be, I realize that I can't have my physics class be like that traditional setup for classes. Just the academic, here's your homework, this is when it's due, this is the late fee, or not late fee, late percentage.
Taxes, fees, yes.
That's my solution. Charge them for being late. No.
Cost them money, yes. They will pay and they will come.
No, so something I have done this year is, and it's partially a little biased because I'm so sick and tired of grading late work, but I totally abolished my late work policy.
Okay.
What I have done is that instead of having homework due every day, I have simply given the deadline that all homework assignments and labs and anything we do in this class is due by the test. And it is a one-time thing. If you don't have it in by test day, no points. And
I like the sound of that.
So when students come in and they're like, oh, I missed yesterday, and, what's the missing policy? I'm like, I don't care that you were gone. Like, just be ready to go by test day.
Right.
Because in my opinion, that is much more like a career setup where your boss doesn't care usually exactly what you're doing at any given moment, and you don't have something turned in every single day. This doesn't exist in the work format. But there are very certain deadlines, like you were saying, that you have to meet.
Right.
And your employer doesn't allow for late assignments, right?
Right.
You can't go in and say, oh, sorry, boss, I got the cabinet in 2 days late. Like, how much do I still get paid? Do I get 50% of my pay? Because
right. And he's sitting there going, it cost me money to let you do, like, it's costing him money for the lateness. Like, it's not this arbitrary. Yeah. I agree. He's exacting these things out of you because those things are being exacted out of him. Like, these things have to get done because he has to get them done because he gets paid. And if he gets paid, you get paid. And if he doesn't get paid, you don't get paid.
Right. And so I think as much as we can in any classroom setup, abolish late work, absent work. And just rather than having day-to-day deadlines, having specific, this is the day that all things are due, just like you would have in work. This whole project, whole setup needs to be done by this time.
Right.
Now, any teachers that are listening know that this doesn't fly with principals and parents because that time when their student does nothing, or it does miss it, then
they fail.
They fail, right? And they don't like seeing that, right? I mean, again, hopefully, if everyone was doing this, we'd get into that mentality that it has to be in by that day.
Yeah.
And so obviously any type of like parent excused extenuating circumstance, there's a medical emergency or that type of thing, I'll give them that.
Of course.
You can't ignore
you were
that.
in a car accident, like, oh, sorry, you fail.
Yeah. Because again, your employer would say the same thing, like, obviously there's a problem.
Right. Yeah.
Or at least you'd hope your employer would understand if you
they don't understand. Get another job.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not good.
So what the other thing I've done for teachers that are listening is because that doesn't fly with parents and with principals. I've also added something that I think actually does help in a little bit and is a little bit similar to a career as well. Is I have things that aren't due at all until the end of the term. So, for example, in my class, my students have what are called extension assignments. And this kind of ties into gamification a little bit.
Okay.
But there's a lot of things that I find interesting in physics that I don't have time to talk about in class.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there's a video that Veritasium does on YouTube where he talks about the world's roundest object. And it's how they are redefining the kilogram based on the number of atoms inside this super round silicon sphere. Anyways, it's a really cool concept, and I really enjoy talking about it. But the problem is it's a really long video, and a lot of students just don't wrap their head around why that's so useful and powerful, and this idea of the physical object defining a constant that no longer relies on a physical object.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyways, the point is it's too much time for me to take in class to do that. So what I'll do is I'll put it on. We use an online management system called Canvas, and I upload assignments to that, and their extension assignments are on there. And they don't have to do all the extensions. They just have to get a certain number of points or do a certain set of them in the topics they find interesting. So they may not find that World's Roundest Object video very interesting.
Yeah.
But they might find the, Mars space rover crash, that happened a couple of years ago. It was a rover ago because there was a metric versus English system distinction in the two systems. Do you know that story?
I don't know that. You got to send me this extension assignment. I need this.
Yeah. Anyway, so one of the I don't know if it was a rover, but one of the satellites they sent to Mars back in the 90s, I believe, crashed because somebody was using English units on the system on Earth, and the satellite they sent or whatever it was using metric.
Really?
And so they were like 150 miles closer to the surface of Mars than they were supposed to be. And it just like crashed. And because of the simple difference between metric and the English customary system. Anyways, but things like that, things it's like I don't have time to go through that whole story in class. So I put that on the website, and they can choose the ones that they want to do.
Yeah.
And for that, I don't make it due by test day, because first of all, again, for the parents and administrator, I can say, look, if they weren't able to get all their homework done, they can do these things on Canvas. They can do some of the quizzes as well. And some of these things, I'm like, they're not due at any time. You just have to get them in by the end of the term.
Yeah.
But again, the reason I do that as well from an educational perspective is they don't need to know, the fact that space expedition crashed to Mars.
Right.
Really at any time during the
that's just interesting.
Material. It's just interesting. There's no real deadline. If you need something for the test, obviously you have to know it by the test, right?
Right.
But these things aren't really, these extension assignments don't really build onto material needed for the test. They're just interesting things that you should know.
Like interesting application ideas. And
so the idea behind that one is that, in work, there are some things that don't really have a deadline.
Right.
There's things you can learn on the job and stuff like that. There's things your boss eventually wants you to be able to do, but you don't necessarily need it right away.
Right.
And so being able to motivate yourself to do them in some reasonable time frame is useful to have. I guess there's still that end of the term deadline, which will eventually motivate you.
Yeah, well, and you have to have that some deadline. There has to be something. You can't just let it go on forever.
Yeah, but it solves two problems of adding content that is more interesting that the students can do, so hopefully they enjoy physics a little bit more.
Right.
But it also adds that kind of leniency that allows me to still make the principals happy and the parents happy. And unfortunately, that's the world we live in where that has to be the case.
Right. I realize that we lack only one perspective on this discussion, and that is the administrative, like the school board side of everything, which is like I don't know anything about that. I represent the student in this situation, and you represent the teacher. So it's
So I'm curious. Like, I mean, obviously it'd be hard to imagine yourself in a physics classroom in that. If you could go back in the day and you had if you had another teacher as a physics teacher and they were doing that type of thing, I don't know. Would you find that more motivating than what you were doing, rather than having the homework due every single day and the late penalties and that type of thing?
I'm not sure. It is really hard to go back and think about it from that person's perspective. Like, I was a different person back then. That was a different me. I'm really curious to actually see how this goes in your classroom, like how it goes over, because I can still see it's obvious in my mind that while it's better, I think it's amazing, I think it's a lot better, but there's still going to be someone who doesn't do their work. There's still going to be someone who dinks around all the whole time because they were similar to me, where they just didn't want to do it, and so they didn't do it. they reap the reward for their actions. Like that's just how that works. Like
Right.
you're done. And maybe that'll help motivate them next time when they take the class again. At the current moment, I think it's genius. I think it really does careerify that part of school, because that like you say, it really does. It falls along that line of acting a lot more like a career. I think, I wonder. One concern I have is that the end of like the final test deadline is kind of far away, and it's kind of hard to imagine that far of a deadline. I don't usually think about them in that kind of length of time, like especially in work. Like this brings up another issue where work, I'm working 8 hours a day on one thing. Like I have one job and I do that for 8 to 10 hours a day. Whereas school, it's like, okay, well, you're going to do everything for an hour a day. You do this for an hour and this for an hour and this for an hour. And so they like spread it out across this huge long distance of a semester of time, which is like a ton of time, like an inconceivable amount of like actual time. Like I can't actually see a whole semester in my head. I can see a week and I can see a couple days, but several months, I can't really visualize that.
That is one weakness I have noticed so far. Again, this is my first year doing this new system. And I've seen a lot of positive things.
Okay.
Where I've had students that have come in and been like, Mr. Hart, like, I missed, 2 days, et cetera. Like, what do I need to do? And I'm like, look, like, just be ready for test day. And they're like, oh, really? Like, I'm like, yeah, you see that checklist? Just make sure everything on that checklist is ready to go by test day. And they're like, oh. Like,
right.
And so, like, a lot of students have found that liberating.
Yeah.
But the issue that you bring up is true, that tests are about 2 to 3 weeks apart from each other.
Okay.
And that's a little bit longer than most jobs, and most people just in general will be able to prepare for something.
Yeah.
If something's 3 weeks down the road, it is a little bit more abstract, a little bit more, oh, that's going to come later.
It'll be later.
So I'm still seeing a lot of students that are procrastinating, because they have a hard time visualizing that far down the road. But I'm hoping as we go on, get further and further along through the semester and through the year, they'll be better and better prepared as they get to each test, because they'll realize trying to get everything in and ready and done on the last couple of days is really hard as compared to just doing it systematically and pacing themselves to be ready for that. But again, I don't have the data yet to show whether or not that's working.
We're still waiting on actual results.
But so far, I've been pleased with what I've seen. Students seem to be grabbing that idea and enjoying the liberty of not having to have so many specific deadlines.
Okay, yeah. I think that'll appeal to it appeals to my brain, at least right now. I'm like, heck yeah, that makes perfect sense. But I think some students will get frustrated with the whole concept. They're like, what do you mean do all the things? Like, tell me when they're due.
Right.
Like they'll just, I don't know. That's the other problem, is that it's so difficult to teach a group of people. Right. Because they're all different and they're all something else. But
I was gonna say, you're preaching to the choir here.
I know.
I completely agree.
There's in the corner like, yeah, I know. I knew this the whole time. I deal with this every day. I think it does move it in the right direction. I also like that you try to pull it, I don't know, the other way. Like you have like other stuff that they can do that's more kind of designed to be kind of fun, informative. Like that's textbooks try and do that. Okay. I saw that in my textbooks, and I saw those sections and I was like, do I need to read that? No, I do not. I'm not going to read it because I have to read this. And they like tried to be fun and informative, but I like the idea of just having them as kind of like these other things that you can do. You pick whatever you want to do. I mean, I would look at that list and be like, oh, heck yeah, Mars, heck yeah. I love space. Space is my jam. And I'd jump on all over that. That'd be sweet. I think when you told me that, and you said that was like kind of like gamification, in my mind, the circles that we had, the one circle in the middle kind of stretched out, and it kind of went work and turned a little bit more into
it bridges the gap more.
Yeah. to stretch it out and cover both careerification and gamification to kind of build a bridge, a longer bridge, like you were saying.
Interesting.
I think that actually is better. I think that's a lot better to have both be like, okay, well, this is how real life works, and this is what you like. This is fun stuff. This is what we like to do. This is what I'm a physics teacher, and this is what I love about physics. And you show them the stuff that's interesting, but at the same time, you turn around and you say, well, you got to get ready for life. Like, I know this is fun stuff, but like, life is coming. It's going to get you if you don't prepare. And this is how you prepare for life. Students ask, well, why do I do this? It's like, well, this is why I do this. And this is why you need to do this, because life is, I think that would have, is there. This is how life works. This is how a career works, is that the project is due this day and you have to do everything. We're not gonna hold your hand and pace you for it. Pace it for you. Like, you have to hold your own hand and get this done. Like, time to grow up and be an adult about it. I think that would have been, looking back, I don't know if that would have, but I feel like that would have been valuable for me to be like, okay, like, it's time for you to grow up and time for you to take responsibility for this thing. At least for younger me, it was like, I don't care because this is something someone's making me do. But as soon as it's my thing to do, as soon as I'm choosing to do it, and as soon as I'm being an adult about it and accepting the responsibility of it, then it's valuable. I'm babbling.
I have found that being very open with my students about it. Mm-hmm. Not that it's like, oh, this is Mr. Hart's crazy, strange, arbitrary deadline system that he made up. It's, I'm telling them, because they can want you guys to be responsible and be ready to have deadlines in life that have a lot more things than just like a single homework assignment. But I also want to give you the liberty to do them when you need them to do them, And so I try to be very open with my students about that, and I think that helps too, because they can kind of see the same vision. If I don't tell them the vision, then it's just kind of some arbitrary deadlines like anything else in school, So I have to be a little bit more open with them about why we're doing it.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think that's really valuable.
We'll see when they get to the first unit test and
we're gonna have
what
some
happens.
Follow-up. Yeah. We're gonna have some hefty follow-up on how this is all gonna go. This actually brings to mind one other thing that I want to complain about. That I saw was a problem with homework, because homework for me was the biggest problem. Homework was the great problem with school for me, because are we good to move on to another? Can I?
Yes.
I can move the conversation forward. Okay.
Yes.
The best thing about work, the thing that I love about work, is that what happens at work stays at work. The great problem that I had with school, the biggest problem that I had with school, was doing my homework. Like, I sucked at homework. I sucked at doing homework. I sucked at getting homework done. Like, I wasn't good at doing it because I wasn't at school anymore. I was at home, and I didn't want to do homework. I didn't want to do all this stuff. And I think that's a problem with the way it's currently done. I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but basically it's the idea of, like, I've devoted all this time to being here. I've devoted 7 hours of my day to being in class, to being at school. And then teachers hand out homework. And it's like, okay, here's all your homework. And even if it's only like half an hour to an hour's worth of homework, I'm not going to do it because I'm not at school. I'm at home, and I don't do school at home. I do home at home. I do first bubble, first circle at home. I do second circle at school, and I do third circle at work. That's where I do these things. I don't want to take that home. I don't want to have to think about it while I'm at home. I'm devoting all this time. I especially noticed that in university. It's like, oh, you have all this homework. And it's like, but I'm paying you to teach me the material. I'm sitting in class and paying you my money that I earned going to work to teach me the material, and all we do is review the thing that I was supposed to have studied on my own. And it drove me crazy. It happened in my math class, and it happened in a couple of my other classes, and it just broke my mind because it felt like it was like completely the wrong way to do it. It seemed like a good idea. That's the thing, is that they came into it. I came into this classroom, and the teacher was like, "Okay, so you have to do these things And then next week in class, like turn in the homework, and then next week in class, like we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about it, and then we'll move through it. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, self-learning, heck yeah. But then it totally broke down because the whole system just kind of fell apart in my hands when I was like, oh yeah, this seems like a good idea, and then it wasn't. It wasn't a good idea at all. I didn't like it, and it didn't work.
Huh. So I'm going to separate the student side of me from the teacher side of me.
Okay.
Because the student side of me loved homework.
What? What?
So I
Pray tell why you loved homework.
It's I should clarify. I loved homework in math and physics and the fields I enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
I didn't like English homework.
Right.
Or,
Right.
Anytime I had to like express my feelings or my opinions, it was like, yeah, why am I doing this? But I loved homework in the sense that, again, as a hopeless academic,
Yes.
I love doing homework because it made me feel secure in the knowledge that we had learned.
Okay.
I never liked the idea of you do the homework first and then we come and talk about it. That never works.
No.
But if it was, let's talk about it, then go do the homework, and then we'll come back and grade it and see how we did, and that type of idea, that's really common in math and physics.
Yeah.
Like, I really enjoy doing the homework because, especially in physics, and again, this may just be why I love physics so much.
Yeah.
You go and you learn about a general concept. Then you go and you do the homework, and you have the general ideas, but now you have to apply them into very specific contexts and problems. And that application is where you really learn the physics.
Okay.
Because you have to be like, okay, I know kinetic energy does this, and I can convert it into potential energy and this type of thing. It's like, oh, now suddenly I have a polar bear on a motorcycle, and he is, riding down a lane, and he trips, and, whatever happens in the story.
Right.
And, like, you're like, okay, I think I know I can do this, and, like, sometimes you have to work around, you didn't do it quite right. But you eventually come to a solution, and you get that final answer, and, like, it's so satisfying. It's like, oh, yeah, that polar bear is sliding on his backside at 30 miles per hour when all is said and done, like, whatever it is.
He slid 400 feet at 30 miles an hour.
Yeah,
on the ice.
So I love that feeling, and I enjoy that feeling. And when I'm doing homework in the fields of study that I enjoy, it's extremely valuable to me.
Okay.
But again, that is me as the student that loves academia. On the teacher side, I have to take it again from the perspective that most of my students don't want to do physics, and they don't love that, same procedure and application that I do, right? That doesn't mean I still don't expect them to learn the material. That's my job. I'm failing as a teacher if I don't expect you to learn the material and I'm not doing it.
Agreed.
So I find that I agree with you in terms of the time.
Okay.
I feel like you said, you spend 7 hours in school. If you're just doing physics because you have to graduate, to spend another half an hour or hour at home on that assignment is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
So what I've been trying to do with my classes, I kind of agree. I try to not lessen the amount of homework, but I try and give as much time as I can in class. Not just to homework, but again to the quizzes and the extension assignments that we do on Canvas. And so I've tried to give at least like a good 30-minute block at the end of almost every class where we were working together, we're doing the assignment, we're still having that time to practice, because I feel like you got to have that practice, especially in math and physics, to really learn it.
Yeah, definitely.
So it has to be there, but I feel like we need to give more of that time in class because students are already have so much time in the classroom. Why not use some of that time to do the homework and the other stuff, right? Because, again, 7 hours a day, they're already giving us so much time. Just ask them to give another hour at home on a subject they don't like. That's too much, in my opinion.
I 100% think it is, because the job won't ask you to do that. You're not expected to go home and still be still be working on cabinets at your house like that. I've never been expected to do that. Like you shouldn't.
They haven't ever tied a cabinet to your car roof
To
and
the
just
roof of my car. Drove home with a cabinet. Like, oh yeah, by the way, we need to have the modifications on this cabinet done tomorrow. So, enjoy your homework for work. Like, oh, I'm getting paid for this, right? Like, no. Okay.
But I do kind of want to stop on this topic for a second.
Okay.
Because it leads into one of the grandiose revolutionary ideas I feel like would solve a lot of problems that this is related to.
Okay.
So if that's okay with you,
yeah.
I want to talk about one other thing I feel like can be done right now
by teachers.
In this case, it's not the teachers, but the admin and the school system.
Yeah. Do tell.
So it's kind of bordering on the revolutionary side, I guess you could say, radical side. But one of the big problems, and this goes back to the Mark Grober study, is that in the grading systems that every school uses, every student starts with an A. And you start with 100%, and as you turn in assignments, you can either stay at 100% or you go down. Right? You are not turning things on time. You're not getting the full points. And it's got to be the most demotivating system that you could ever have on the planet. Yeah. Where your only job is to survive with the grade you have, not to get it.
Right. You're not earning it. You're holding on to it for dear life.
You're holding on to it for dear life.
I'm thinking, oh, snap, if I don't pass this physics test, I'm going to fail the class. Like, I never thought about it in that context, but that's,
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it is a really weird way to set up the school system. So one of the ideas I really liked that, I think his name's Matt Anderson from Bozeman Science. He was really big into the gamification stuff. And he has some things I don't necessarily agree with. But one of the things that he really talked about was this idea that our grading system is set up in a really poor way that gives students almost the motivation to fail. Yeah. Because they almost know they can't hold on to that perfect A unless they are a really good student. Okay, yeah. And so it's like, well, I might as well let it go down to such and such a grade because I'm probably going to go there anyways. And so, like,
right.
If you believe you're a C student, your grade will probably naturally fall down to being a C student because that's your expectation.
Yeah.
And so the way we really need to switch it up is to, and what he proposes, Matt Anderson proposes, is that rather than having everyone starts with 100%, you start the grades at 0.
Yeah.
And the expectation is that by the end of the year or the end of the semester, whatever it is, the grade builds up and the student can see, oh, I've reached this point. Now I can't go below a D. Oh, now I've reached a C. Okay, great. I'm at a C. If I get a little bit more work, I can get to B, right? And so they see this build and they can't fall back from it. And they can put in assignments, and they're not constantly seeing their grade drop as they're going along.
It's not a fear of, oh, if I don't get a 40 out of 40 on this test, like then my grade's going to go down. It's holy snap, I got a 35 out of 40. Heck yeah, like that's not too bad. Now I'm at a C. Heck yeah.
Yeah. Now I only need this many points to get to this grade or whatever.
Yeah.
So a couple of difficulties to overcome with this.
Okay.
For example, in my school, if a student drops below a D, we set them up on this intervention schedule and this intervention time where they have to come in and get help with their assignments because they're falling behind and that type of thing.
Okay.
I personally don't agree with that. Anyways, I feel like there's better ways to do that. But a lot of schools and teachers and principals like that idea that we catch students before they get too far behind. Which I can see its pros and cons. Do you have some thoughts on this, just out of curiosity?
That's ridiculous. I just, in my mind, I can see where this is going. Of like, to solve that problem, I'm like, oh well, if we just do the revolutionary change of everyone does this, then you could set up a new system to catch students rather than trying to catch them as they fall below your made up levels of perfection.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's it just makes me laugh. And I can see how that would be a problem if you wanted to do it as an individual teacher, if the whole school didn't change, you'd run into some problems with this system.
Yeah, and that's why it has to be like a school-wide change, because
Right.
otherwise, if I'm doing that and all my students have Fs for the first 4 weeks of the class because they don't.
Admin's like, the heck's going on here? You're like, don't worry. About midterms, it'll pick up.
Yeah,
Mid-semester, it'll change.
it just wouldn't work on a single teacher level.
Right.
Matt Anderson kind of proposes a system that kind of works. There's too much details though that I don't like.
Yeah. Okay.
There's too much having to switch between the two systems to make it
Right.
work out.
That's my thought. Is the only way to solve that is to have a hybrid system where you have the students don't see the 100% starting grades, but you have to manage both. You have to manage the 0 and the 100% grading systems.
Right.
So
The other hard thing in terms of motivation
Mhm.
is it's really nice once they hit like the D mark where they know they're going to pass,
Yeah.
and they can motivate themselves to get better and better grades because
Yeah.
they just need so much points. But there's a 60% gap between 0 and a D.
right.
So finding ways to help students keep going through that part where
The
they would
0,
not be
yeah.
passing the class
Yeah.
is a little tricky. It's like, oh, you're 6 weeks in and now you're finally never going to be able to get below a D. That's great. But, that was a lot of 6 weeks where you're seeing an F grade.
Right.
Or feeling like you're not going to pass the class.
That makes sense. I think it'd be valuable in that case to do away with the lettering system completely and just do percentages. Maybe do a 1 through 10 system, and rather than an A through F system, because then you're like, oh, you reached 10% of all the stuff you needed to learn. Like that's a 1, and you need a 7 or a 6 to pass. I think a 6 is kind of low to pass, but you need a 6 to pass. And so instead of having the A, B, C, D, E, F scale, we swap the scale, which is dives right back into the revolutionary change of like change it all.
That is interesting. I've never thought of like doing a different lettering system
Mhm.
or a different scale.
Understandably so. I mean, that scale is used in everything.
Right.
It's like so integrated into our society. Like I can say, oh, the A through F scale, and you like know what I'm talking about perfectly,
Yeah.
100%. So
Yeah, it's interesting because right now I'm breaking my students into categories in my mind.
okay,
There's students that will do well in your class because they have support at home
mm-hmm.
and they enjoy your material.
Okay, yeah,
Those students you hardly even have to worry about.
yeah.
I could even barely teach and they probably would do well in that class. That's how I was. If I had a bad physics teacher, I still did good in physics.
yeah.
Like
yeah.
I had a physics teacher that could barely speak English one time in college. It's like I still got an A- in the class, like because I enjoyed the material.
Right.
So like when you have a student that has support at home and they enjoy the material, they're going to do well in your class. Then you have a block of students that have good support at home and they're generally good students, but they don't necessarily enjoy your class per se. And those are the students that I feel like this is where we have to tune the system the most to.
Okay.
Because you want to make sure the students that are good students that want to do well, not necessarily because they enjoy the material, but because they want to do well in school. Right. The last ones, you want to make sure you're never like slashing their opportunities or demotivating them, right? And so I'm trying to think how this system affects them. Just for continuity, the other blocks in my mind are students that don't have support at home but do enjoy your material.
Yeah.
Those are the most interesting to think about and how you can support them. And the last ones are those that don't have support at home, don't enjoy your material. Those are really hard to get to. And I don't think this system is going to change any of that.
No.
But those two in the middle of students that enjoy your material but don't have support at home, and those that do have support at home but don't necessarily enjoy your material, I feel like this could be a more motivating setup and system than their standard A through F if you did it in the right light and did it in a way where somehow you were able to motivate them through that first kind of 50-60% where they can't see right away that they're going to be able to, get the grade they need or whatever it may be. So, again, I'm the academic, right? And so I can't put myself into that mindset. I'm trying to think of how the 1 through 10 scale might change it, or if a different grading scale would affect it. I don't know.
Right, right. I think I'm not sure. I think just the getting rid of the abstract A through F lettering is, I think that would help that system work, because I like that system a lot. I appreciate that a lot more now that I'm like thinking about it, and this is the first time it's been introduced to me. But like, of course, like that makes perfect sense. You don't ever like not in you want to talk about gamification? Never in games are you given like, oh well, guess what, you failed, so. Or you didn't do perfectly on this, so we're going to take away some of your abilities. Like, no. Your character always gets better. They don't get worse because of something you didn't quite do just right. Oh, it just makes me so mad.
That would be like a fun visualization to make. Make a video game that mirrors our education system right now.
That would be crazy.
So like it's like the least fun game ever.
Yeah.
Like, it mirrors how we like do rewards and penalties. Like
that would make for a crazy interesting experiment to like send out to a bunch of people. I have a bunch of gamers, like a bunch of people who play games regularly, like play this game and record their experiences and be like, guess what? This is how the school system works. This is how it actually is happening, and that's why nobody wants to do school. Like that's why people like me don't do well in school, because that's just crazy. That would be so cool. Oh, I want to see that. That would be so cool.
I'll get on it.
Okay,
I'll
good. You're just like, yeah, I got time. Yeah, squeeze it in there. This actually brings to mind one of the greatest problems I had with one of my math classes. My math classes, I think, were the most varied in the way that they taught them and the way that they were like the graded and the way the content was distributed and yada blah blah blah. But one of the systems that I used was actually the Alex system, ALEKS, for one of my math classes. And it started off like, oh, this is great, like, oh cool, an online system that will help me learn my math. Yeah, heck yeah. But this class, I ended up not doing most of the Alex assignments because one of my great gripes, I complained like directly. I tried to find like the most direct way to complain about this to Alex to let them know that this is the stupidest system ever. Oh my goodness, I have so strong feelings about this. Still,
this is great to watch you.
It's been like a year since this happened, and I'm still just like, I'm still livid about it. But the way this system would work for homework is you'd go on and you'd be given a problem. Okay, so at the top of the screen, top right, there's these bars that you have to fill up. And say it's 5 bars. I don't really remember exactly, but there's like your 5 different like progression bars basically, and you're given problems of appropriate difficulty based on how far you progressed through the assignment, right? So the first problems are easier, the second problems are harder, and the third problems are the hardest. It was 3 bars, not 5. 3 bars, and every time you completed a problem correctly, you got one of your bars filled up. It was like, bing, kind of like this gamification.
Nice.
Like, success, like you did it. You completed this problem. And you do another one, it would fill up, and you're like, heck yeah, you nail 2 of them in a row. And you're like, heck yeah, I'm feeling good. And then you go to do your next assignment. And what would happen is you do the assignment, and say you got this problem wrong, because it's the hardest problem. It's the most difficult one to do. You got it wrong, and one of those bars would go away. So you'd step backwards, and you're like, okay, well, we got to step back and cover more material. And did this. And as I was doing this, my mind almost exploded with rage and fury at this system. And I thought about it, and I realized what my problem was. Because I wasn't doing well. I wasn't motivated to do the homework. Even though it had this like progression system, like, oh, you're going to progress through the work, and then you're going to be done with the work. But when I finally understood what was actually going on, my mind broke a little bit. And I was like, this is not how anything should work ever. Like, this is not how a system should work. Because what would happen is I would get motivated, and I'd do one, and I'd do another, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm doing good. And then I'd lose a point. I'd get the next problem wrong. And and then I'd do the next problem. I'd try to do the problem again, and guess what? I entered it a little bit wrong. Math is one of those things where if it's an online system, it has to be entered kind of specifically. Like each system's kind of finicky and particular about the way it wants to be in there. And so I enter it wrong, and boom, another point gone, and I'm back to 0 points. And I was like, the heck is going on? Like, why are you stealing my points? And I thought about it. If you think about it as a quiz, you don't take a quiz and, okay, so you got the first 3 questions on the quiz right. Like, okay, points 1, 2, and 3, kind of like the system we're talking about. You're getting points for getting those questions right. And then you get, what if you got number 4 wrong and they took away one of your points? And you got number 5 wrong and they took away another point. And your 5-question quiz, you got 3 questions right, but you only got 1 point. That's what was going on in this terrible Alex system, because they stole my points. I earned the point, and then they took it away from me for getting a different question wrong, a different thing, and you could just lose. You could spend hours and hours sitting on the system, running through these points, trying to accomplish one 5-point assignment, 5-question assignment. It drove me crazy. So, the way...
Aaron, I have to admit something.
Yes.
I actually know what Alex is. I just wanted to see you rant about it. But my students, I used to teach a 7th grade math class, and my school is mandating that we used Alex. And all my students hated it for that exact same reason.
It's so demotivating. I'm telling you, you go in and you do the 3 questions, and then you get to the last question, and you're like praying. You're like, please let me answer this question correctly. And there's like this fear that fills my belly that I'm like, I can't click on the submit button. I can't do it, because if I click on it, it'll be wrong, and I'll have to do more homework because I got it wrong. Like it's like this infinite loop of homework that you just could get stuck in and stay there forever doing homework over and over. The idea is like, oh, well, eventually they'll learn and eventually they'll figure it out. Well, guess what? Guess what? You can't. What if I screw up the entry? What if I get hasty and I'm upset and I screw up the entry? Like, oh.
Alex is one of those things that looks good on paper to educators, but when you actually implement it, it's just awful.
Yeah.
Not helpful. Anyway.
And so, I guess the way this relates is that if we could shift to the 0% grade scale, starting at 0, the zero grade scale. If it falls into this, if it does that, if it does what Alex does, it would be worse. It would be infinitely worse.
Right.
So we can't do that.
No, it should only go up.
Right. Because
that's how things in real life work.
Right, exactly.
Things don't degrade after you've completed them.
Right. Like, oh, I made this cabinet, and then like later you look over at the cabinet, you're like, you're putting together a different cabinet, you break the end, and you look over at the other cabinet just like falls apart. You're like, the heck? Like, the heck happened? Like that's not how this works, guys. So many strong feelings. But I love the 0% grade scale. I think that would be motivating. I think that would be incredibly helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah. Again, there needs to be something a little bit helpful in that first range, but overall, I think it would be better to be constantly building up rather than holding on for dear life at the top.
Right.
So.
Big old bad teachers prying your fingers off one by one, Like, oh, you got these questions wrong. You got this. You failed this test. You're going to fall.
All right. So we've talked a lot about some of the simple things that we can do now to make education better.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to keep a lot of the problems we've had for a long time if we only make these changes.
Right.
And so there's really one big revolutionary idea that I want to submit to you.
Okay.
That I think is the one I was mentioning at the beginning. Will probably offend a lot of people.
Ooh, I'm excited.
I think will cause some upstirring. But
okay.
I think it is really the solution in my opinion. And I'm curious your opinion on this as well.
Okay. Get your torches and your pitchforks ready so we can
This is why I don't tell anyone where I live. Moments like these.
Yes.
Just kidding.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So I guess I want to preface this with a story. Okay. I have a good friend that Aaron also knows. And he is a computer programmer like me. And one day he comes up to me. This is like when I was first starting my master's. I hadn't been programming for 4 or 5 years, you know, like it had been a long gap. And he's like, hey, David, do you want to go and do this programming competition with me?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And I was like, sure, why not, for fun. I'm not really good at programming right now. I'm still getting back into the swing of it.
Yeah.
But so we go. They pair us off with another guy because they had so many submissions. They had to do teams of 3 instead of 2.
Okay, yeah.
So we got paired off with this other guy. And he was really helpful as well.
Okay.
And we did the competition. It was a lot of fun. And we do it. And we get 9th place out of like 100 teams.
Heck yeah.
And
That's
we're
awesome.
like, we're like, whoa, like that was pretty good. And so the next year we talked to that same guy and get him on the team again. We're like, we're just going to start as a team of 3 because we did so well last year.
Yeah.
And so we did that competition again, and we got 2nd place that year.
Really?
And so we
wow.
all got like Amazon gift cards and prizes and stuff. So it was like a lot of fun and really cool. It's like, oh, sweet. Like, this is cool.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm going to claim that I'm the weakest link. The other 2 guys I felt like did most of the work. But I did solve, there was a couple of physics-based problems. So I did help on those ones. So
those are the,
that was my contribution.
You're reading through the problems. And you're, physics, I can do that. You jump on, you're like, I got this.
But the point is, the reason I bring this up is that my friend that had initially asked me on to help him with this competition, the company that hosted the competition got him a job at that company because of how well he did on the programming competition.
Wow. Okay,
After he got his degree, he ended up working for that company.
Wow. Okay, yeah.
And
that's sweet.
And even later, after that, they offered me a job directly
Wow.
for the company, but I turned it down because I was still working on the master's and stuff. And they said, well, keep in touch after you're done with the master's. We want to talk to you.
He's a hopeless academic, that's why.
It's kind of true. I'd have to stop the master's to go work for them.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
I'd rather invest a little bit more time and get this finished.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring this up is that the degree that my friend and I both had in programming was not the main factor in what got us our jobs, right? It was some other external factor that got us our jobs. Now, obviously that degree is important.
Right, you had to learn to program.
Yeah, that's what got us to program. That's what helped us program. But the company was not looking at any other factors other than they knew we could program because of the degree, and they knew we were good at it because of the competition.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a very specific case. But I bring this up because in education, a lot of times in college, but especially in high school, we treat the degree and the diploma as like these all-powerful gates to your future, right? Like if you have the high school diploma, like your future is set and you are free to take your career into this magical wonderland. At least that's how my principal sometimes describes it, it seems like.
Yeah,
But
it's just it's the kind of this grand, like you have to do this, and when you do it, everything will be better after that.
And I see so many cases where the diploma itself means hardly anything. And in college even, where people get degrees, and the degree wasn't the main factor that got them the job that they're currently in.
Right.
Like they still needed it, but it wasn't the main contribution. It wasn't the main factor that was the influence that got them to the position they're at today.
Right.
And I don't bring this up to say that we should get rid of diplomas and degrees. That's not the direction I'm going with this.
Dang, I was hoping. I had my fingers crossed. But,
What I am saying, though, is that we have this idea that the diploma is this all-seeing, all-powerful gate to your future, which it's not. And we build so much on this diploma as it is showing that you know everything about everything, right? You know all the topics of academia. You know English, and you know physics, and you know math, and you know all these things in history. And it's like, it's supposed to represent that this shows you know an amount of something about everything.
Yeah.
But in reality, employers often don't care you have a diploma. And often, even if you have a diploma, you don't have sufficient knowledge in those topics. Even though you passed your English class, or even though I passed all my English classes, I knew diddly squat about English when I got done with high school. If you asked me to type up a report, like a real report for a company after I got out of high school, English would not have properly prepared me for that. My English classes would not have. And that's not necessarily the teacher's fault.
Right.
It's the fact that I didn't care about English.
Right.
And so no amount of teaching me about English is going to properly prepare me to have a job where that is needed.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And so we got this like really weird feedback loop occurring where students don't want to learn certain subjects because they're not truly interested in them.
Yeah.
But we have high expectations that they do, so we force them into these classes where they get enough to get by in them. And then we have this paper that doesn't mean anything because the employer wasn't dependent on those skills that they didn't actually know. And they're just like going further and further down this ladder that is feeding on itself.
Okay, yeah.
And so I don't want to talk about requirement, all the problems that are associated with, because there's more than that, in my opinion.
I know. I'm sitting here going, oh, there's this and this and this and this.
But this is my proposal.
Okay.
I say we get rid of the general knowledge requirement by the end of junior high. And high school is more like college, and you are in a specific field by 10th grade.
David, once again, you've blown my mind with just a game-changing idea. I love it. I love it. I love it. See, after going to university, after going to college, this we want to do circles again. I feel like university is being pulled down into high school level stuff.
Right.
Like gym requirements for university, I think, is the silliest thing.
Yeah, that's another. That's kind of connected with it. That
Right.
There'd be less general education requirements in university because the high school would have less of the general education requirements.
Right, because you need a general education, but like, do you really need to take a third biology class in college, a college level biology class?
Yeah.
For your computer science degree? No. I think that's ridiculous, and I think it's crazy, and I think this would help a lot if we did. It's a genius idea just to get rid of general education requirements, just to totally get rid of them out of. I would say, I think out of junior high. I think high school should be a transitionary period more than it is.
Right.
Of like there are hardly any general education and a lot more stuff is taught. A lot more things can be introduced, but definitely out of universities. I think that's just craziness. I think it's ridiculous because like you say that employers don't care about your general education knowledge. Like, they don't care. I would be shocked to find one that cared about my history class. Especially because, guess what, for general education, you're not given one history class, you're given the option of 6 history classes.
Right.
Go. Which one should you take? It doesn't matter. Then why am I taking it? Why am I doing it? Like, this doesn't make any sense.
So I'm glad you're seeing all the positive implications would have.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up some points I know I've heard people bring up when I've brought this idea to them.
Okay.
So
Do tell.
one common problem that people will often say is, well, what if you don't know what you want to do by 9th grade?
Yeah.
Right. Whatever grade it is where it starts really being, you need to know like your specific area.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because people say, well, like, what if you start going into, let's say you wanted to do history and then you realize you don't want to do that and you end up going into engineering or something. I haven't seen that transition often, but, whatever. If you don't know what you want to do, right? And whenever this argument is made, I kind of laugh because that's exactly what happens in college all the flippin' time.
all the dang time.
You know how many people I know that have changed their majors?
Thousands and thousands of dollars to figure out what you want to do in college when you could just figure that out in high school.
Yeah. So my argument is always great. Like if they decide to switch, great. Like,
right.
I mean, you'd have to adjust the system so that if you started in one field, and then like you decided you wanted to try some other, you could adjust what the requirements are to graduate.
Right.
Because you don't need to catch up on 3 years worth of math classes if that was what you were wanting to do now when you started in science or something, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You have to adjust the graduation requirements. But overall, I'd much rather have people trying routes and realizing they don't want them when they're getting it for free rather than when they're doing it in college and then they don't graduate ever in college because they change their majors too many times.
Right.
And then they don't have the money or the motivation to continue.
Right. Right.
If that process can happen when it's free, you'd be much better suited for college.
Oh yeah. Then you'd have at least a general idea. I still look at college, and I started with a computer science degree, and I'm sitting here going, I don't know if I want to do computer science, but I've spent $8,000 investing in a computer science degree. Like, the heck? That's ridiculous. Like, I agree 100% that it's way more valuable to do that when it is cheap, when it isn't part of the public education system. It would take a lot of shifting, though. It would take a lot of change in the whole system, but
yeah,
I think it's a great idea. I think that's,
there's some other positives, too, as
Okay.
well. I think it'd be better for the teachers as well. We have a lot of problem with keeping teachers in the education system because they get frustrated with all the problems in it, and then they leave.
Right.
I think the average lifespan of a teacher right now in the education is like 5 years or something.
Really?
Is the average. It's really bad.
Yikes.
And I think a lot of that problem is they have to teach their general subject to such a general audience. So you're starting with the lowest level of your subject.
Yeah.
And everyone has to take their subject, regardless if they like it or not.
Right.
And then there's just it's not as fun when the students aren't involved in it because they don't want to be there.
Right.
And I think you'd mitigate a lot of that if the teacher is teaching, first of all, higher level classes because they're getting into more specific areas with their students. And there's not the requirement that, Susan over there that still isn't passing, 8th grade math is now trying to take a physics class where we're using 10th grade math. Like, those problems would not exist if that specification or if that general knowledge requirement wasn't there anymore.
Right. And that makes perfect sense. It sounds terribly demotivating to try and have to teach a classroom full of people where half the people don't care. Like they couldn't care less about the topic that you're trying to help them understand. That sounds like the worst. I like that solution. I like that. I like that positive.
I think we have, again, the big one is, they just don't know something. They won't know for sure what they want to do.
Right.
And especially students that are like really not into school. Again, they don't have support at home and they're not interested in certain things. I say, great. Let them choose something random.
Right.
And they'll figure out really quickly whether or not they want to do that thing. Right? It'll force them to explore.
Right.
You can't force someone to learn, but you can force them to explore routes if it's in the system, right?
Yeah. I like that. You have like categories, and then you just select a category. Like, do you want to try science, or do you want to try art? Do you want to try English? Like, what do you want to try? And they're like, arts. And you're like, okay, press the random button. Like, go to a class. You couldn't decide, so go. You're gonna study music theory. Okay, have fun.
Yeah.
And then they'll be back in next week wanting to change classes because turns out they don't like music theory.
Right.
So I think that would work perfectly. Is seriously like an indecisive student. I think a big random button would just would solve that real quick.
All right, you are in these classes.
That's what I can see. Yeah. Like, we're gonna start you off in these 3 entry-level classes, and see if you like any of them, and come back in 2 weeks when you figure out.
That's true too. You could start multiple specifications, and then they could,
because you have 7 hours
Yeah.
at school a day, a full-time job at school every day. Like, ugh. I like
The
that.
other change that would occur with that
Okay.
is that the 7th through 9th grade, or I guess you can include 6th grade, we have the junior high system here. So it's 7th through 9th for middle school, but other places have 6th through 8th.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, those
Whatever it is,
kind
middle
of 3 or
school,
4
junior high.
years
Yeah.
in that range, you would need to include more exploration as well. So for example, students have a lot of electives in junior high, which is a fun time to kind of pick a topic that you're interested in
Yeah.
and take classes in it. But right now it exists in the format of you take one class, an elective in that topic you like, and you just do that through all your years of junior high and high school. In this format, I would suggest in the lower junior high grades, you have more required exploration. So you have to take at least one foreign language class. You have to take one computer science class. You have to take one arts class. And a lot of these places have that kind of idea, but I'd make sure that students are kind of exploring more than they are now.
Okay.
Take away a couple of the electives in the junior high
Force exploration.
and give them, yeah, I guess that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Force a little bit more exploration in the junior high years. And then that way they have a lot more capability of choosing in the high school years. If they take a computer science class in junior high and they absolutely hate it, they know not to go down that route. You know,
don't do computer science, right? That's oh yeah, you didn't like these classes. And at the end of the classes, you could just like send out a survey, be like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you like this class? Like, how much did you enjoy the content and the material of this class? Like, oh, 1. You're like, okay, not doing that again. Like, oh, and then when they get to the high school, it's like, okay, well, here's your assessments. Like, here's what you said you liked and didn't like. Pick from that. Like, use that as a resource. I think this is another point of value. I think from this is that it puts it into their hands a lot earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me increasingly frustrated how little control they have. Like, being an adult is all about like you figure it out and you do it because that's what you're supposed to do. Like, you're an adult, do it. Like, this is you get to figure it out. You get to do what you want to do, but you need to do it, or else you're just going to sit around. And I think the school system doesn't prepare you well for that. Again, it doesn't prepare you well for a career or adulthood. It's we're going to hold your hand, and we're going to hold your hand all the way through K through 12, and then let you loose into this this very expensive university and say, okay, well, have fun, figure out what you want to do. You know, it feels like we're holding a hand too much instead of being like, okay, what do you want to do? Like, you need to take ownership, teaching students how to take ownership and how to take responsibility for the things that they want to do. And teaching them that, like, okay, this is how the world works. Like, this is why we're doing this, because you need to figure out a career. They have that in school. Like, they have, like, the career assessment stuff or whatever.
Right.
Garbage. Worthless. Didn't help me at all.
Nice.
It didn't help me at all. And I don't like it, but I like this system. I think it's incredibly valuable.
I'm going to say one more thing that I think is going to be the most the most dangerous one to say.
Ooh, please do.
Because the junior high years would be important for this exploration, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say for those junior high years, get rid of the yearly English and math requirement. I would make it maybe 1 or 2. They can choose which years, whatever it may be. But I honestly believe, and again, I'm a physics teacher. Like, I understand math and love math and all that stuff.
Okay.
But we hold math in such a high regard. But I honestly believe that no amount of forcing the students into math classes every year is going to make them want to do math. So you treat it just like any other exploration in my mind.
Okay.
They do 1 or 2 years of math, open up some other options in the junior high years so they have more time to explore other options.
Right.
And then if they want to do something in math or science, guess what? They're going to have 3 years of high school where they're not taking any other classes, none of those other electives. You'll be able to make that up really quickly, especially if the student wants to learn.
Okay,
math.
Yeah.
Same with English, right? We hold English in such high regard. I got through life just fine, and I hated English, right? It didn't matter in my field until I got into the English of physics and of technical writing and stuff in college.
Right.
And so if your students want to do creative writing and all the different things involved in English, again, I don't know them all.
Like the English stuff.
The English stuff that
some
English
people like
do.
doing. I don't know who likes doing that stuff, but
guess what? You teach 1 or 2 years of English, and then in high school, they will have, for those that are doing any field related to English where they'll need to communicate effectively, they'll have plenty of time to get caught up, and not just get caught up, but you'll be able to do more and more with the students that actually want to do the creative writing and the persuasive essays and that type of English and all the things we teach. So I say get rid of that yearly requirement, in my opinion. I think that will rabble-rouse a couple of people, but that's my honest opinion. Make all the topics equivalent in the exploration phase.
Okay. I mean, it never hurts to try. I don't see why not. You make a good case for it. I'd like to hear a counter argument. I don't have a counter argument. I'm sitting here going, well, I didn't like English, so yeah, get rid of it. I don't want to do any more English.
That's true. We got some biased perceptives here, so we need perceptions.
Yes, but I agree. Like, you don't need. I don't know. We do have a lot of math requirements that go a little bit above what I think regular math people need, like regular jobs need for math. Like a lot of like STEM jobs need it, and it's necessary. But like, I do cabinets and I don't do algebra ever.
Right.
I start to get into algebra when I do like drafting and with like the computer side of it. But as far as like cabinets, dude,
Yeah,
it doesn't take
geometry.
algebra to add a 16th to an 8th. It's 3/16. It's easy. Fractions. It's easy. Like, don't make this complicated. And so you don't go too far over wasting time teaching something that they're not interested in, that they're not going to get involved in later.
And they're not going to remember. That's the thing
Right.
that drives me crazy too.
Yeah.
This government's like, oh, they need these skills for later in life. Do you think, honestly, that your students are remembering stuff from 9th grade, 10th grade, math, English? Like,
Right.
it's not going to stick if they don't like that subject. You know?
I remember more social interactions with my friends and with other teachers than I remember content that I learned in 7th through 9th. Like, I don't remember any of the content, but that one time that you looked like an idiot, I looked like an idiot. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that real well.
Yeah.
And so I agree. Like, it's not very like it is foundational in some ways, but like.
And if you change the whole system,
Mm-hmm.
then the way we would view it would be totally different.
Mm-hmm.
The students would value, I know this sounds weird to say, but I really think students would value the English classes and the math classes and the history classes and just any class in those areas a little bit more during those years.
Yeah.
Because they know it's just, I'm doing this once to see if I like it.
Yeah.
And then it's not such a big problem. The reason why math is such a big problem for students is because we build on it for years and years and years, from 7th grade and before all the way to, senior year.
Yeah.
And so if you fall behind in the earlier years, you're going to fall even more behind the years after that. And so we have this huge buildup for students that know they don't have any interest in math.
Yeah.
So we, just if we change the whole system, we'd see it differently.
Yeah.
And I think I honestly believe the students would see it a little bit differently as this is a time to see what I like. They still may not try, they're still 7th graders, 8th graders.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. There's always the last category of student that's like, not that they're not going to do anything anyway. It's like, okay, well, that's, but I think
gave you this option.
It's, yeah.
I gave you this chance.
I think it's valuable to say, well, that's your fault. Like you didn't take a hold of it. Like time to kind of grow up a little bit and be like, okay, well, this is just because you didn't want to do it doesn't mean it changes anything. Just because you don't want to go to work doesn't mean you don't have to go to work.
Right.
Like there's always stuff you have to do, and that's part of it. But
and even the worst case, and even in the worst case, maybe a student will always hate an English class like I did.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because then instead of having to go through 6 years of English through junior high and high school, they can say, okay, I just need to survive these 2 English classes or whatever it may be. And then I know for sure that I just don't want to do English. But that's okay. I've studied enough English to know what it's about.
Right.
And know the field generally.
Right.
That I can go do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so even in the worst case, in the absolute worst case, we have them do this huge exploration in junior high.
Mm-hmm.
and they just survive those 2 years.
Yeah.
That's better than them surviving 6 years because they didn't want to do anything in school because we're constantly putting them into these same classes just at higher and higher levels in the topics they already don't like.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think we'll still run into some of those problems, but if we did that, like we'd kind of open up the field to allow a lot more. Like if there were a lot more options, you could try out a lot of things because like I think they'll survive those 2 years. And then still be stuck with like, okay, you have to figure out something to do. Like you have to figure out something to learn.
Yeah.
And they'll just be like, and there'll be students who still won't know what to do. And then it's like, and then that's when you just have a counselor step in and be like, well, this is what you're gonna do because you can't decide. You're not deciding, right. And so we're gonna do the hand holding now and tell you what you're gonna do, so that you get through this because this is required. Like by law, you have to actually do this. So we can't actually just not have this, but
Right. But again, one last point on this I want to point out.
Okay.
Going back to the students, the categories that I have in my head.
Yeah. You're 1 through.
The students that have good support at home, interested in your material.
Yeah.
This definitely helps them, right?
Yeah.
So physics student like me that wants to do science, physics, math, I get to go right into it.
Yeah.
And I get to get involved into something I'm really interested right away.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than waiting until after high school.
Right.
Well, I didn't wait, but most students have to wait until after high school to get into that. Students that are just trying to be good students, and they have good support at home, but they're not necessarily interested in your material.
Yeah.
Again, this also helps them because, again, we say now it's not you have to take every class. Now you get to pick what you want to do, and maybe they don't know that right away.
Yeah.
But they're figuring that out a lot sooner, and again, while it's free, rather than finding that out in college. That's
right.
often what happens to those students that were good in high school, but really weren't interested in a certain topic or maybe just one specific topic.
Yeah.
Right? They struggle in college when they get to that environment because they still don't know exactly the route they want to take.
Right.
So this helps them to explore earlier.
I agree 100%. I feel like I fall into the lower category of those students where it's like I had good support at home, but like I didn't want to do school. I didn't like school, but I think that would have helped. And so I agree. That's super helpful.
And then the next category I think is the most interesting. The don't have support at home, but have interest in a certain idea or material, right? Mm-hmm. I think this is really, honestly, the students we will help the most.
Okay.
Because, again, these students suffer from the remedial math class, the fact that they don't have that support from home, so they don't generally have a desire to complete homework.
Yeah.
And they see school as something that has to be survived. I mean, I teach these students all the time. I taught some remedial math classes.
Yeah.
And these students, they come from hard situations. They come from situations where I go, if I was in that situation, I would not care anything about school.
Yeah.
Like I can't blame them for anything they do in my class because I'm like, I would have probably acted the same way.
Yeah.
But if those students can see a light at the end of the tunnel, the problem right now with school is it's such a long, continuous drag for them of things they don't want to do, things they're not interested in. But if they can get into that field of what they want to do by 9th grade or whatever it may be, then they have some hope. Because I know a lot of students that I've talked to them and they're like, or to go to college, and I don't have the grades to go into college because they can't get the general education requirements down for college. But if they're in 9th grade and they honestly know they want to go into like drafting or, whatever field, and they can start working on that while it's free, even if they don't have that support at home, they're going to be so much more motivated and feel like they actually have a route somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
Because right now they're just being held down by the education system because they're forced to take so many classes and topics they don't enjoy.
Yeah.
And they're not being motivated by their parents to continue on in that education.
Yeah, the general education requirements are killing their motivation to do what they wanted to do.
If we have any hope of helping those students, they have to be studying the things they actually have a chance of doing later on in life sooner.
Okay, yeah.
Because right now they just see this arbitrary diploma that doesn't lead to anything in their pathway.
Yeah.
we tell them it's this magical gateway to their future, and then they get done with high school, and they're still in the same problems because they don't have any skills for jobs that they might actually enjoy doing.
Right.
And then there's that group that still won't care and still has no support at home, and you probably can't reach them still. But
well, I think they might be able to be bumped up into the next category with lots of exploration. I think pressing the random button really will help them start to actually figure it out. Just like standing ovations, there's always going to be that person. But
that's true.
But I think with the majority of them, I think that it would help lead them into being that third category that you talked about of being motivated to do the work because they like the subject. I think that would help push a lot of them into that category and pull a lot of people out of that category.
That's a good point.
If I had a crappy situation at home, like I would have been that category. I would have been that student. That would have been me. And the school system right now wouldn't have gotten me to something that I would have enjoyed. Like it wouldn't have pushed me, but I think it could have. I think it can do that with this system.
Anyways, I can't think of any other arguments against it or for it at the moment.
Right. It's okay. Well, they should hear about it. We should be able to hear about it. People.
Yeah, we'll see how people comment on this. I'm curious about these ideas. But I honestly think that would really, really help the education system.
Yeah.
So we just gotta go do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first we gotta get the podcast popular, and then we can go do it.
That's true. We need that powerful influence in the world.
No. And so concludes the great culmination of Save the World. Even though we'll be back in like 2 weeks, so it's fine. It's not the end. It's just, it's such a serious episode too. Like usually we try to be a little bit funnier, but I appreciate the seriousness.
We could talk about tamales again if we need to.
Heck yeah! Where did I see tamales the other day? I was at the farmer's market. Yeah, there were tamales at the farmer's market. I was like,